If ever there was a horror franchise that lived up to the term guilty pleasure, it was Final Destination, a franchise that locked in its formula and gimmick with the very first movie and just ran with it. The result is that if you've seen one of these films, you've really seen all of them. The main character has a premonition of some big disaster that allows them and a few friends to cheat death, only to find out that death doesn't give up quite so easily. You knew that none of them were going to make it to the end credits, but the real entertainment was trying to predict how and when it was going to happen, and watching the Rube Goldberg style setup for each death. It was a fun little mix of gory slasher flick and dark ironic humour that perfectly understood the assignment, took itself just seriously enough to get you invested, and never asked too much in return. The series finally petered out with the fifth movie, because even Hollywood can only recycle the same formula so many times, but like other horror franchises from the 90s and the 2000s, it's now been gone just long enough for people to start missing it, and that means a reboot. And that reboot comes in the form of Final Destination Bloodlines, the sixth entry in the franchise and the first film in almost 15 years. Fuck me, I feel old. And now that I've seen it, what's it actually like? Well, I can confidently tell you that Bloodlines is dumb, cheap, borderline incoherent garbage. And I loved it. Honestly, I'd almost forgotten how much fun these movies can be, and for all its faults, and don't worry, I'll get to those shortly, Bloodlines was a neat little reminder of a bygone decade when horror movies were a little less stuffy and pretentious and willing to just let their audience have fun. Now, explaining the plot is practically a waste of time in this case, because watching a Final Destination movie for the story is like going to a strip club to discuss your tax returns. Yeah, you can do it, but neither party's gonna get much out of the experience. But okay, fine, I'll do it just for you. So the movie opens in the 1960s when a young lady named Iris is on a date with her boyfriend Paul to a newly opened restaurant that definitely isn't the Space Needle. And wouldn't you know it, a series of unfortunate events unfolds that ends up destroying the entire restaurant and killing everyone inside. Or does it? Flash forward to the present day, and Iris's granddaughter Stephanie is suffering from recurring nightmares about the incident, so she travels back to her family home looking for answers in a sequence that feels weirdly rushed and underdeveloped. The trail eventually leads her to Iris, who's been holed up in a cabin in the woods for decades at this point, living as a complete recluse so that she can cheat death. See, it turns out that her premonition at the start of the film allowed Iris to intervene and prevent the disaster, saving hundreds of lives in the process. But this being a Final Destination movie, death does what it always does and slowly killed off everyone who's supposed to die that night, and their families who were never even supposed to exist. But by keeping herself isolated, Iris has basically held death at bay because apparently it's not allowed to go after her family until it kills her first.
What, are you retarded?
I mean, what can I say? This death guy's a good kid. He plays by the rules. Anyway, within about 2 minutes of Stephanie showing up, Iris is out of the picture, and now Death is free to go after her and the rest of the family. And well, I think you can probably guess what happens from there. Like I say, not many people are going into a Final Destination movie expecting a complex, thought-provoking storyline, and I'd be lying if I said Bloodlines bucks that trend. The script touches briefly on the idea of generational trauma and how one person's actions can have repercussions that last for decades, but honestly, it's never really explored in enough depth to make it meaningful. The characters don't really help with this problem either. There's a big cast, but none of them are particularly distinct or interesting. Stephanie's a pretty forgettable protagonist, and the fact that the movie speedruns her intro means that we never really learn much about her. By the end, I didn't care much whether she lived or died, which is a bit of a problem in a Final Destination movie. The only real standout for me was Richard Harmon as Eric, who gets a bit more of a character arc and actually seems to be having fun with the role, so good on him, I guess. I do have to give an honourable mention to Tony Todd though, who makes his final on-screen appearance in this movie before he passed away last year. You can definitely tell the man was ill when he filmed his scenes, and I guess he knew he wasn't long for this world at the time. Apparently the director let him ad-lib his final lines as a mark of respect, and in a film that's generally lightweight and silly, it's actually a pretty poignant goodbye for such a legendary actor. Rest in peace, my friend. You earned it. But let's be honest here, this is a Final Destination movie, and all of this other stuff is just a side order. The real meat of the experience is in the death scenes, so how does it stack up against the rest of the franchise? Well, generally pretty good for the most part. They definitely didn't skimp on the gore with this one, and I'll never look at lawnmowers the same way again, that's for sure. There's a bit too much CGI at times, and a few too many characters that just get insta-killed by something big and heavy landing on them, but overall, they were pretty entertaining, darkly ironic at times, and played with my expectations just enough to keep me engaged. Which is just as well, really, because at almost 2 hours, Bloodlines is pretty long for what it actually delivers. I've got to be honest, I did find myself checking my watch a few times around the midpoint, where there's a good 15 or 20 minute stretch where nothing particularly interesting happens, and I couldn't shake the feeling that a tighter edit would have delivered a much leaner, faster paced 90-minute movie that doesn't overstay its welcome, which is what Final Destination films usually excel at. Ultimately though, while it might not be pretty or elegant, I think Bloodlines is still entertaining and fun enough to make it worth your time, and weirdly, it actually got me kind of nostalgic for that early 2000 period of fun, unpretentious horror movies that knew exactly what the audience wanted from them and were happy to give it to them. And hey, maybe we could use a little more of that in 2025. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.